Hey guys. Tonight we begin with a question most people are too afraid to ask. If God is all-powerful, why hasn't he destroyed Satan? Why let him roam? Whisper? Ruin? Why allow the war to drag on? Across centuries? Across souls? The answer isn't what you think. It's not mercy for the enemy. It's something far more personal. So settle in, because tonight we step behind the curtain of time into a courtroom that's still in session and discover why the story wasn't over and why, maybe, it waited for you. But before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You exist before anything has been named, before breath, before time, before the laws that hold things in place. There is no earth, no heaven, not yet. Only presence and pressure, and the echo of something vast waiting to be born. You don't know if you're floating or still. There's no shape to measure against, no sound to chase. Only silence and tension, like a held breath that stretches forever. And in that silence, you begin to notice the edges, not of yourself, but of something else. Something near you, something not quite like you, something not quite right. You're not alone. The presence nearby doesn't move, but you feel it. Vast, heavy, almost beautiful, but too much. Its silence feels intentional, not patient, like the rest of creation's waiting, but calculated, watching, waiting for the moment it can speak. You don't know the word for danger yet, but you feel it. This isn't fear the way humans will later feel fear. It's not tied to survival or pain or instinct. This is something deeper, a disturbance in what should be harmony, an imbalance that shouldn't be possible. And yet, here it is. No form, no voice, just a wrongness in the quiet, like a beautiful instrument, ever so slightly out of tune. Creation hasn't begun, but something in it is already cracking. You try to reach out, not with hands, because you don't have them, but with awareness. You stretch toward the thing near you. It doesn't move away. It leans closer. You sense splendor, radiance, something made to be near glory. But instead of reflecting the light, it wants to own it. And even though light hasn't been spoken yet, you feel it. This being wants what hasn't even been given. It wants more. You don't yet know his name. No one does. But one day they'll call him Morning Star, Light Bearer, Lucifer. And even then, they'll only be partly right. Because what he wants is older than his title. He wants a throne. He wants to be seen, not as a reflection of God, but as equal to him. And he wants it before light is even born. You retreat inward, not in fear, but in reverence, because you realize something holy is about to happen, not from him, from above him. The voice. It hasn't spoken yet, but it will. And when it does, everything will change. The pressure increases. A divine weight fills the silence, and then, finally, it happens. Let there be light. And there is. But it's not the kind of light you're thinking of. It's not sunlight, not fire, not the brightness of stars or the glow of moonlit seas. This light is different. Alive. It doesn't shine. It reveals. It stretches through the void, like breath filling lungs. And when it touches you, you feel seen, named, not with syllables, but with meaning. And then you look back toward the other presence. He's still there, still glowing. But now, the glow feels colder. You watch him bask in the light, not in worship, in ambition. He doesn't bow. He doesn't sing. He doesn't rejoice at the voice. He measures it. And in that moment you know, before time begins, before creation expands, before angels are even numbered, something has already chosen to stand apart. Not in ignorance, not in weakness, in defiance. And the story hasn't even started yet. The voice moves through the void, like something heavier than sound, more final than thunder. It doesn't echo, it declares, "Let there be light." And instantly, the darkness loses its claim. It's not pushed aside, it's rewritten, as if reality itself has remembered what it was always meant to be. But this light, it isn't soft. It doesn't warm or flicker or fade. It consumes. It fills every crack of unbeing and paints it with presence. It rushes out, not as a color, but as a command, one that creates by merely arriving. You are surrounded by it. You can't blink, because you don't have eyes. But still, you see, shapes begin to emerge, not physical, but radiant. Wings like flame, eyes like vision itself, voices not speaking but resonating. Angels, dozens, then hundreds, then more than numbers can hold. All waking, all bowing, all singing, except one. You see him. At first, he is like the rest, a burning thing wrapped in splendor. But then, he begins to shimmer more brightly, not by design, by desire. As if the light has entered him, and he doesn't want to reflect it. He wants to keep it. You feel it before you understand it. A wrongness hidden in radiance. And then, a name, spoken by the one who made him. Not as a warning, not as a curse, as a crown. Lucifer. It means light bearer, morning star, firstborn of radiance. He shines more brilliantly than the rest, because he was meant to. God spoke light into being, and within that light, he shaped a creature to carry it, display it, and serve as its mirror. Lucifer hears his name and doesn't bow. He doesn't sing with the others. He stands, glorious, and something behind his eyes begins to shift. You sense it. He isn't just aware of his beauty. He's calculating it, measuring what it earns, comparing what he was given to the one who gave it. He turns toward the throne, not in worship, but in curiosity. The angels keep singing, but his voice falls silent, not out of reverence, out of hunger. You watch as his wings catch the light and twist it ever so slightly toward himself, a subtle redirection, not enough to notice, but enough to matter. The light he was made to bear begins to feel claimed, and God sees it all, not with surprise, not with disappointment, but with patience. The same voice that declared light now holds space for rebellion, not because rebellion is permitted, but because choice is sacred. Still, the other angels rejoice. They haven't seen the flicker behind the morning star's smile. Not yet. You look at him again. You want to believe it's nothing, that you imagine the pause, that the radiance is still pure. But something ancient has already cracked. He was born in light, but he has seen the throne. And something inside him whispered a question he was never meant to ask. What if it were mine? The music continues. Heaven rings with glory, but a new note has entered the melody. It isn't sung, it's felt, a tension, a tremor, like a future war, breathing beneath a present peace. And still, the light shines, not because it doesn't see what's coming, but because it chooses to. He stands at the front of the procession, wings folded like woven flame, eyes like still oceans, too still. He doesn't look around in awe like the others do. He doesn't turn his face upward in wonder. He just looks, and everything in his gaze feels like it's being measured. You're not sure what's unsettling you, After all, he is beautiful, unreasonably beautiful, not merely luminous, but designed to dazzle. His voice, when he speaks, doesn't echo. It resounds, it commands, not through volume, through perfection. He was made for music, not the kind with notes and staves, but the kind that holds the throne in trembling reverence. He was created to lead the worship of the Most High, and at first he does, with elegance, with passion, with something the other angels follow not out of duty, but gravity. When he lifts his voice, they rise. When he kneels, the others bow. His presence is magnetic. But only later do you realize that magnetism can pull more than praise. It can pull loyalty, envy, and eventually, war. You watch him move across the courts of heaven, and it's effortless. Almost too effortless. There is no hesitance in him, no fear, no trembling. And it begins to dawn on you that worship, for him, might not be surrender anymore. It might be performance. The others still follow. Their eyes glow with innocent reverence. They love him deeply. They trust him. Why wouldn't they? He walks closest to the throne. He knows the rhythms of the heavens better than any. They echo him not because they doubt the king, but because they see Lucifer as an extension of the king's glory. But there it is again, that look in his eyes. You catch it in a moment when he thinks no one sees, a flicker of something, sharp, hollow, hungry. He watches the throne, not like a servant watches his master, but like a sculptor stares at someone else's masterpiece and thinks, I could have done better. You flinch, not outwardly. There's no movement here, not yet, but something in your being pulls back, because you've seen hunger before, and this isn't the hunger of longing for God. This is the hunger of wanting what God has. He's not reaching for it. Not yet. He's too intelligent for that. Too composed. No, he's still playing the part. Still singing the songs. Still radiating that impossible beauty. But deep down, something in him is starting to crack. You wonder if even he knows it yet. You remember the first time he stood in the presence of pure light. He bathed in it, reflected it, rejoiced in it. But slowly, quietly, he stopped reflecting. He started absorbing, letting it settle in his wings, his words, his name. He was the morning star, but now he watches the dawn and wonders if it needs to rise without him. There are no shadows in heaven. Not yet. But if there were, they would be gathering around him. And still, the worship continues. Still, the heavens ring. Still, God remains on his throne, unshaken, unmoved, because he already sees the hunger. And he already has a plan. It starts small. A pause that lasts 1 second too long after the song ends. A gaze that lingers on his own reflection. Not in water or mirror, but in the glory of God that shines off every surface in heaven. He watches it curve around his form, catch on his wings, flicker through the strands of his voice. And for the first time, it looks like he's not worshiping anymore. He's admiring. Not God, himself. He tilts his head just slightly, as if testing the angle. His movements are elegant, but there's calculation now. Less offering, more performance. The other angels keep singing, keep bowing, keep aligning themselves with the radiant center of praise. But you notice that Lucifer's movements don't quite line up anymore. He's still close enough to look right, but the rhythm is drifting. When he sings, it is still flawless, but the pauses are longer, the crescendos are sharper. He draws out notes that were never written. His harmony has turned into spotlight. You watch him twist reverence into signature. No one else seems to notice. Why would they? His voice is still majestic, his countenance still blazing. He's the morning star, still bearing light, still reflecting brilliance. But the brilliance is bending, not toward the throne, but toward the throne's reflection in him. He doesn't say anything heretical. He doesn't challenge, doesn't question, doesn't shout. He just looks. A little longer than before. You see it in his eyes now. He is listening to himself, studying the way others respond to his presence, watching how they echo him. Reverence is morphing into attention, and attention into adoration. You've never seen pride this early before. You didn't even know it could exist here. But here it is, dressed in worship. Lucifer begins to lead less and display more. His wings fan wider. His light glows hotter. He doesn't just carry the glory of God, he angles it, letting it fall just right to make the others see him in it. And still, no one stops him. Maybe they're afraid to see it. Maybe they trust him too much. Or maybe they don't yet have a name for what he's becoming. But you do. It's not rebellion. Not yet. It's attention addiction. The slow poisoning of a servant who forgets who he's reflecting. A creature who starts to believe that what passes through him originates from him. He is the most beautiful of them all. But beauty, here, was never meant to be admired. It was meant to be directed, redirected. Everything that shines is supposed to point. But Lucifer no longer points. He poses. He stands closer to the throne than the rest. But his gaze is no longer fixed on it. It drifts, left, then right, then back to the others. He watches who watches him. And in that look, you see it. The question, not spoken, not dared aloud, but it trembles behind his brow. Why not me? Why not my throne? Why not my name? Why not my crown? You flinch again, not because he said it, but because he hasn't. Which means it's still growing, still hiding, still being fed in secret. And God watches, not with fear, not with surprise, not even with sorrow, just stillness, holy stillness, because God already knows. The crack has formed, the light bearer is beginning to fall in love with his own reflection, and heaven, perfect heaven, is holding its breath. The music hasn't stopped yet, but soon the silence will begin. It arrives like vapor. No sound, no shape, no name, just a question, a quiet, invisible question, curling in the corners of a mind that was meant for music. He doesn't say it, not yet. He doesn't even know if it's his. It feels like breath that came from nowhere and settled in the folds of thought, unnoticed, until it grows warm. The others are singing again. Their voices rise like rivers into the courts, weaving praise through eternity. But his voice hesitates, just slightly, just enough to hear something else in the silence between syllables. What if? That's all it is at first. What if I could shine on my own? What if the light didn't have to pass through me? What if it came from me? What if the throne didn't need to be so far away? No action, no plan, just a pulse of thought, so thin it might slip past the gates of heaven unnoticed. But it doesn't, because thoughts have weight here. And this one, this silent, slithering seed, is heavier than it looks. You watch as it settles behind his eyes, not fully welcome, not fully rejected. He doesn't cast it out. He turns it over, as if it were a jewel, or a note in the wrong key that somehow still fits. The seed presses deeper. He was made to worship, but what if he was worthy of worship himself? He was made to serve, but what if he deserved to rule? He was made to reflect glory, but what if he could possess it? The soil of heaven isn't meant to hold this kind of thought. It was never designed for self. Every being here breathes in surrender and exhales praise. Every pattern, every purpose, every breath has always pointed away from self toward glory. But now, something else is growing. Lucifer stands with the same wings, the same radiance, the same perfect design, but something in him is curving inward, folding, turning its gaze toward the mirror instead of the maker. You watch the first sin form, not as a rebellion, not as a shout, but as a shift. Just a tilt, a turning of the heart. No one else sees it. The angels continue their song. Light pours through the throne room like rivers of molten gold. But you feel it like a hairline crack across stained glass. The glory is still shining, but it's starting to bend. Lucifer begins to move differently. His steps don't follow the melody. They compose it. He's not walking in rhythm. He's demanding it. His presence doesn't blend into the chorus anymore. It hovers above it. The whisper in his mind is growing legs. And the terrifying thing is, it still feels holy. He still sings. He still glows. He still leads. But something hollow is echoing inside him now. He begins to forget that the light was never his. He begins to imagine that the others are beneath him. He begins to believe the whisper. You are more. And heaven, perfect heaven, starts to shift. Not in structure, not in sound, but in weight. Because sin, real sin, doesn't need a sword. It only needs a thought that shouldn't exist, left to grow in the soil of a heart that no longer trembles. It doesn't begin with noise. It begins with absence. A missing harmony, a glance that lingers too long, a pause between words that used to flow like water from the same river. Heaven's unity now fraying at the edges. You feel it before you see it. A subtle thinning of presence, like someone exhaling too long and forgetting to breathe back in. You walk past an archway lined with sapphire and gold, and a pair of angels step back, mid-whisper. Their eyes don't meet yours. You search the gathering halls, the vast fields of light where choirs once sang in perfect communion, but now the sound is fractured. Still beautiful, still brilliant, but no longer whole. Something has broken. You catch sight of Lucifer, far off, near the highest platform where light bends closest to the throne. He's surrounded, not by worshippers, but by watchers. Angels who used to blend effortlessly into worship now stand apart, not fallen, not gone, just tilted. Their posture is the same, wings folded, faces lifted. But their silence speaks louder than their song ever did. He doesn't speak commands. He doesn't need to. His presence is enough. And that's the danger. Some are still loyal, still aligned, still fixed toward the center of all things. But others are circling, listening, asking the same unspoken question. Why not him? It happens slowly, like a disease without symptoms. Worship turns to allegiance. Allegiance turns to sides. And then sides turn to suspicion. You pass another angel, one you've known since the first vibration of creation, and their eyes hesitate on yours. You feel it in your chest. The doubt, the distance, that quiet question blooming in both your hearts. Do you still stand where I stand? No one says it aloud. Because here, there shouldn't be sides. Not in this place. Not in the throne room. Not in the domain of perfection. There should be no war in heaven. And yet, it begins. Not with blades, but with betrayal. Not with screams, but with separation. Not with violence, but with the unbearable silence that falls when unity dies. Lucifer steps forward, and for the first time, he speaks. Not as a servant, but as a sovereign. The words he uses are elegant, measured, almost sacred. He doesn't curse God. He doesn't renounce heaven. He simply declares that there's another way, another voice, another glory worth exalting, his own. And with that declaration, heaven tilts. The stars hold their breath. The wind stills. Even time seems to pause, because eternity itself is being split. Michael moves. You've never seen his sword drawn before. Never needed to. Peace was always more powerful than steel. But now, steel is necessary. He doesn't speak. He simply raises the blade. Behind him, legions rise. Not out of hatred, but out of holy grief. You feel it pulse through the heavens. This isn't conquest. This isn't dominance. This is defense of what is right, of what is whole, of what is his. Wings unfurl, light shatters, sound bends, and the war begins. Not for land, not for thrones, but for truth, for alignment, for the soul of what heaven was always meant to be. And in the middle of it, you're not sure who's still standing with you. That's the horror of this war. Not the violence, but the division. It happens faster than anyone thought it would. No speech, no trial, no thunder of gavel or announcement from the throne. Just movement, final, fierce, irrevocable. One moment, the heavens tremble with the tension of two eternities staring each other down. The next, lightning. Not the kind that streaks across the sky, the kind that splits it, tears it open, makes it scream. Michael doesn't ask. He doesn't warn. He doesn't wait for permission. He rises, not as a servant this time, but as a sword. His wings burn with purpose. His eyes no longer weep. He raises the blade not in rage but in alignment. You can feel it, like gravity remembering itself, like creation snapping back to center. Lucifer doesn't flinch. He still thinks there's time. That glory can protect him. That beauty might grant him one more breath before exile. He forgets. Glory wasn't his. It only passed through him. And now it passes him by. The light no longer bends for him. It slices. You don't see a battle. You see a verdict. One swing, and the sky opens. One cry, and the echo swallows the stars. There's no scream from Lucifer. No final plea. Just a streak of presence torn from the heavens, like a name being erased in real time. And behind him, others. Wings, thousands of them, folding not in worship, but in recoil. 1/3 of heaven, gone. Not in dust, not in blood, in silence. A silence that shatters the choir like stained glass underfoot. They don't fall with drama. They don't fall with flames. They fall like weight. Weight that cannot stay where it once belonged. The very order of things rejects them. The throne room repels them. The breath of God that once sustained them now pushes them away like a wind that's decided what no longer belongs in its lungs. You watch Lucifer tumble, not like a star, like something heavier. He's not alone. They fall as a body, a legion of light now twisted, recoiling, collapsing inward like fire folding back into ash. They descend not through space, but through distance. Distance from glory, distance from order, distance from the presence that once pulsed through them like blood. And the void that receives them isn't empty. It waits. The earth doesn't catch them gently. It bears them like bruises. And suddenly, the world isn't only beautiful anymore. It holds something else now. A rift. A wound. You feel it in your chest before your feet touch the ground. Heaven isn't broken, but it's been scarred. And you remain. Not because you were stronger, not because you were better, but because mercy held your place. Michael lands like thunder, not to celebrate, not to declare victory, only to guard what remains. His blade stays raised, not for vengeance, for boundary. Heaven's gates remain open, but now they watch. You look around. The air is still glowing, the throne is still shining, the seraphim still sing, but there's an ache in the atmosphere now. A third is missing. And in that absence, a new kind of war begins. Not with swords, but with story, with rumor, with hunger. Because Lucifer may have fallen, but his voice hasn't gone silent. Not yet. You descend slowly, not cast out, but called down. No blade chases your back. No fire scars your wings. You are not falling in rebellion, but in reverence, in obedience, in wonder. The veil between heaven and earth parts like breath on glass. What was once above now draws near, not as punishment, as purpose. You are being sent, not sentenced. This is no exile. This is the beginning of something deeper. The stars haven't yet taken their places. The oceans are still waiting to be named. Mountains swell under shifting skies, unsure if they should rise or bow. Earth is still soft from the voice of God, like clay that remembers being spoken into shape. And you hover, not quite touching the ground, not quite ready to land. It's beautiful, but not untouched. He's already here. You feel it before you see it. A vibration in the soil, a tension in the air, like something holy was twisted just enough to splinter. The aftershock of rebellion lingers in the wind. Trees that should have grown straight lean strangely, as if already bracing for the weight of centuries to come. The silence isn't pure anymore. It's listening. Lucifer has touched this place. He doesn't walk it like a stranger. He claims it like a throne. His fall didn't end in darkness. It ended in domain. The same voice that once led heaven's worship now whispers to the cracks in the earth. He moves through the wilderness like a prince looking for a kingdom to corrupt. You watch. He does not limp. He does not look lost. He moves like someone who still believes he can win. And maybe that's the most dangerous part. Because his beauty hasn't faded. His light hasn't vanished. It reflects, refracts, distorts. He knows how to shimmer just enough to convince the world he never fell. And the earth, being young and untested, lets him stay. For now. He doesn't notice you yet. Or maybe he does, and simply doesn't care. To him, you are not a threat. You are a leftover, a remnant of the system he rejected. He believes he is free now. He believes power lives where rules are absent. That truth is optional, and love is a currency to be twisted. You feel something ache in your chest. Not fear. Not yet. It's grief. You grieve the shape of what he could have been. The music that should have filled eternity. The harmony that was shattered the moment pride sang louder than praise. But there's no going back. He's not Lucifer anymore. Not truly. That name has cracks in it now, a hollow echo where heaven used to ring. He walks the edges of this earth, sowing silence where there should be worship, planting questions where there should be wonder. You walk further. The wind smells like rain before it's earned. Animals blink slowly, unsure if they should fear you. Everything is still deciding, still new, still being written, and you're here to watch it unfold. You are not sent with a sword. You are sent with eyes, with presence, with witness, because this is where it begins. Not in the thrones above, but in the dust below. Not in lightning, but in footsteps. This is the stage, the battlefield, the garden before it grows teeth. You are not fallen, but you have fallen into a world where he waits. And God is still watching. Not because he's absent, because he's letting the story breathe, because justice takes time, because real love waits. So you wait too, but not in silence. You ask the question without words. It doesn't need to be spoken. It drips from your presence like dew from morning leaves, a silent ache in the air around you. The other watchers feel it too, though no one dares to give it voice. Not yet. Not here. Why wasn't he destroyed? Why is he still here? The ground beneath you holds his footprint. The sky remembers the smoke of his descent, and still, The throne above does not summon fire to erase him. You've seen angels banished for less. You've seen stars shaken from their place for the pride of burning too hot. But him, he moves freely. He whispers, he waits, and the heavens remain still. This doesn't feel like mercy. It feels like a riddle no one wants to solve. You walk to the edge of a cliff, overlooking a forest still wet with the breath of its creation. Trees sway like worshippers that haven't chosen what to worship yet. Birds sing without knowing who taught them to sing. And beneath it all, slithering just beneath the grass, is the shadow of a choice. He's already here. The enemy, still alive. You remember his fall, not with glory, but with shock. One moment he shimmered like the first song ever sung. The next, his wings collapsed inward like a lie folding itself into silence. And yet, when Michael raised his sword, when the order came to cast him down, there was no second order to finish him. There was no extinction, just exile. A third of heaven gone, and still no end. No roar of finality. Just a slow descent, and then the stillness that followed. The kind of stillness that feels like a pause between thoughts, or like God himself was letting something play out. But why? You've seen the power of the Most High. You've stood in the radiance of judgment that melts even the memory of sin. You've felt what happens when he simply speaks, and universes collapse or rise to meet him. So why not him? Why not the one who shattered the unity of heaven? The others don't ask. They guard. They serve. They descend and ascend on assignment. But you wait. And in the waiting, you begin to wonder if the answer isn't found in destruction, but in design. Because power doesn't flinch, and love doesn't panic. Maybe this is restraint, not absence. Maybe destruction is too simple for a God who operates in eternity. Maybe the story needs a villain to reveal the hero's full beauty. Not because evil is good, but because good can only be seen as good when it's chosen, not assumed. Maybe that's the key. He wasn't erased. Because love must be proven, not programmed. If the enemy had been erased instantly, what would you have learned? What would creation have learned? That rebellion leads to silence? That power deletes its rivals? But instead, here he is. Still walking, still whispering, still failing. And God? Still waiting. Not in weakness, in absolute control. Because a sovereign God doesn't need to erase his enemy. He only needs to outlast him. And you are part of the audience now, watching the plan unfold. Not confused, just humbled. The question still lives inside you, but it's softer now. Why wasn't he destroyed? Maybe because the plan was never about destruction. Maybe it was always about glory. The answer doesn't come, not as thunder, not as flame, not even as a whisper. You ask with your spirit, not your lips, but heaven offers no reply. Just the sound of wind through newly formed trees, just the hush of stars breathing into place. Just time, unfolding. Like scripture, you're not allowed to read yet. And still, you're not abandoned. You were not cast down in wrath. You weren't hurled from the throne room in disgrace. You descended with intention. You arrived quietly, like oil poured in a wound. Not to fix it, but to witness how deep it runs. You weren't sent with answers. You were sent with eyes. The earth is still soft with beginning. There's no death yet, no graves, just space. Space for things to grow or to fall. And you are here to see which. A silent ambassador of something not yet revealed. A sentinel between two invisible kingdoms. Sometimes you walk, sometimes you wait. Sometimes you watch the rivers and wonder how long they'll run clean. Because he's here too. The one who fell. You've seen him, cloaked in form not his own. Slithering through intention, smiling through silence. He's not creating, only corrupting. twisting breath into suspicion, bending beauty into bargain. You sense it. He's not idle. He watches too. But not to understand. He watches to hunt. And that's when you realize why you're still here. You're not alone, because neither is he. God didn't leave the battlefield empty. He filled it with his presence, not as a strike, but as witness, as patience, as promise. You're not a soldier, not yet. You're not a judge, not yet. You're an instrument of restraint, a living pause between justice and mercy. And you are not the only one. Across the earth, scattered like seeds of a coming harvest, others walk the same path. Watchers, messengers, those who didn't fall, but were sent downward anyway. Some are stationed in silence, others in storm, but all of them waiting. You catch glimpses of them in the edge of dreams, in the breath before repentance, in the stillness that arrives when humans cry out and don't know who's listening. They're there. You're there. Not to stop the evil, not yet, but to testify that it was seen, that it was never hidden, that no shadow went unnoticed. Because justice delayed is not justice denied. The delay is part of the design. You begin to understand, not all at once, but like light through branches, fragmented, glorious, unfinished. God doesn't owe creation an explanation, but he gives it one anyway, slowly, through seasons, through struggle, through you. One day, perhaps, the answer will come as a roar. But today, it comes as a task, to watch, to endure, to stay until the page turns. Because when the question is too holy for an answer, the only thing God gives is himself. It could have been simpler. A universe stitched in yes, a cosmos that bows on instinct, obedience baked into every breath, like gravity or time. But God didn't want silence. He wanted love. So, he took the gamble. Not the gamble of ignorance. No, he knew exactly what would happen. The rebellion, the betrayal, the long, long road back. But he still did it, because love that is programmed isn't love. And from the very first moment to the moment, light pierced. Nothing. That choice was baked into being. Freedom. Not just for humanity, even for angels. You remember the way Lucifer stood in the throne room, draped in brilliance, wrapped in wisdom, dripping with glory. He had everything but the one thing no one can be forced to give, love that chooses. He chose differently. And still, God did not rewind creation, did not edit the script, did not revoke the gift. Because real love doesn't trap. It waits. And you begin to see it. The gamble wasn't a flaw. It was the plan. In every star that burns, and every creature that breathes, there's that holy risk. The risk that something made with care might spit in the face of its maker. That something kissed by glory might turn and curse the light. That worship could warp into war. But still, God allows it. He allows betrayal. He allows pain. He allows even Satan to walk the garden paths, not because he's weak, but because he's that strong. Strong enough to let the story breathe. Strong enough to let evil rise, just to show it will fall. Strong enough to let freedom run its full terrible course, so that when love returns it is real. You've seen it in the eyes of humanity, the quiet ache to know why evil is allowed, the cry that asks, if he's good, why doesn't he stop it? But they don't understand. Stopping evil instantly would mean stopping freedom, and stopping freedom would erase the very thing that makes love holy. God doesn't want robots. He wants sons, daughters, a kingdom of the willing, not the programmed. And so, he waits. Even now, you feel it, the pull in the air, the friction between sovereignty and surrender. Every creature is choosing. Every heartbeat either turns toward light or deeper into shadow. Even the fallen made a choice. Lucifer wasn't tricked. He was tempted by himself. And God didn't strike him down on the spot, because to do so would have undone the whole design. You look around at the world and you realize this is the proving ground, not just for man, but for freedom itself. Will it lead to ruin, or will it return to the one who gave it? He could have built a kingdom with no sin, no pain, no rebellion. But he chose instead to build a kingdom where love is chosen, where loyalty is tested, where even the enemy must face the weight of his own decision. It is dangerous, but it is divine. Free will wasn't the mistake, it was the masterpiece. He wasn't made wrong. There wasn't a flaw in the design, no crack in the mold, no shadow in the light that birthed him. Lucifer stood in perfection. He shimmered with wisdom. His voice could bend the air around the throne into reverence. When he walked, it was like beauty had grown legs. You saw it. Not just the power, but the placement. He stood closer to the center than any of us, a prince of the presence, the morning star. He didn't fall because God created evil. He fell because God created choice. And choice is costly, always has been. It could have been locked, the way the stars obey their orbits, or how the sea won't pass its boundaries unless told. But that wasn't love, that was law. And God wasn't after control, he was after communion. So he made freedom. Freedom so real, it could hurt him. And it did. Lucifer didn't stumble into rebellion. He climbed toward it. One step, then another. Admiration twisted into envy. Reflection turned into fixation. He looked at the glory shining off of him and thought it was his. And God let him. That's what stings the most. Not the rebellion, not even the war, but the silence before it. The holy pause while the thought grew teeth. The stillness of heaven while pride took shape. God didn't strike him down. Didn't strip him of light the moment it flickered the wrong way. Because to do that would be to admit that freedom was a mistake. And it wasn't. Freedom is the most dangerous thing God ever made, and the most divine. It's the same thing he gave to you, the same thing he gave to Adam, to Eve, to every trembling creature since. And with it comes the question, what will you do with it? Lucifer answered with rebellion, but it was still an answer. And God didn't take it back, didn't rewind the dawn, didn't unmake the angel who turned. Because if freedom only exists until it offends, it was never freedom at all. The truth is sobering. Lucifer's fall wasn't a glitch in the plan. It was the cost of the plan working exactly as intended. Freedom was given, a choice was made, and heaven held its breath. This wasn't about power. God never lost that. It was about proof that even in the highest places, where light is thick and worship never stops, the will still matters. And now, the rest of the story unfolds on earth, where choices stack like stones, where every yes echoes and every no stings. You see it more clearly now. Why God didn't stop him. Why the morning star was allowed to fall. Because if God had canceled Lucifer before he chose, then love would have never meant anything. It would have been safety, not sacrifice. Obedience, not adoration. Fear, not faith. And so the light bearer chose and fell, and freedom remained, untouched, unrevoked, still dangerous, still holy. That's why Lucifer was allowed to rise, so he could fall by his own hand. Not because God wanted evil, but because he wanted real love. And real love has to be able to say no. He paces the edges of the world like a king, but he's never held a crown. Not a real one. The ground doesn't tremble when he speaks. The winds don't obey him, and light doesn't flinch. Still, He carries himself like a god. You've seen him do it, in the whisper behind temptation, in the smirk behind betrayal, in the quiet corners where pride breeds silence. But he's not a god. He's a shadow with a mouth. And for too long, creation has believed the lie that this is a war of equals, that heaven clenches its fists when Satan moves, that God and the devil are locked in an eternal wrestling match, light versus darkness, good versus evil, as if the outcome isn't already written. But you've stood too close to the throne to believe that. You know, God has no rival. Not in heaven, not on earth, not in the pit that waits beneath. Lucifer isn't rising. He's falling, slowly, dragging centuries with him. And every time he speaks, it sounds louder than it is. Because echoes fool the fragile. Because fear loves a loud voice. But power isn't volume. It's authority. And he lost that the moment he turned away. God never fought him. He didn't have to. It was Michael who rose. A created being against a created being. Angel against fallen angel. Permission against presumption. You remember the day. No lightning from the Father's hand. No thundering wrath. Just the weight of judgment and the silence of finality. Fall. And he did. That's what people miss. Satan isn't dangerous because he's powerful. He's dangerous because he's persuasive. Because lies wear crowns in this world. Because rebellion wears perfume. Because the serpent never shouts, he hisses. He doesn't command storms. He whispers in them. He doesn't control fire. He stokes it when it's already lit. He doesn't rule hell. He dreads it. That's another myth. Brain. That the devil sits on a throne of bones, laughing while flames dance around him. But hell wasn't made for him to reign. It was made for him to be ruined. He is not a king. He's a prisoner with a delayed sentence. He moves only because he's allowed to. Tempts only because time still ticks. Roars only because the chain hasn't been pulled tight. Yet. You see it now. God allows him to remain not because he's struggling, but because he's waiting. Waiting for the story to unfold. Waiting for choice to mature into judgment. Waiting for love to finish what it started. The enemy can prowl, but the leash is held in heaven. That's the difference between rivalry and opposition. A rival is a threat. An opponent is a tool. And when God is finished using him, he will be discarded like dust shaken from eternity's robe. No one will mourn. No one will wonder. And no one will ever confuse the two again. The creator and the created. The author and the antagonist. The king and the coward who tried to steal his throne. You see it all more clearly now. This isn't a battle. It's a countdown. And Satan's not climbing. He's circling the drain. They didn't vanish. They restructured. They didn't fall into chaos. They brought it with them. What left heaven that day wasn't just a third of the angels. It was a strategy, a structure, a system of defiance that didn't die when they hit the earth. You feel them before you see them, like tension in the air before a storm, but colder, more coordinated. These are not the demons the world imagines, shrieking things, clinging to shadows. These are different, fallen, yes, but not mindless, not scattered, not broken in the way people hope. They still carry the memory of heaven. They still speak the language of light, even as they twist it into something else, something darker, something that sounds holy but leaves rot in its wake. They don't need to possess bodies. They possess systems, movements, governments, empires. They don't whisper into one ear. They write policies, draft manifestos, inspire idols. These aren't the ones begging to enter pigs. These are the ones shaping kingdoms from above. And their allegiance is not to hellfire. It's to pride, to the original echo of Lucifer's lie, I will rise. You walk through cities and don't see them, but you feel them. In the monuments built to man's glory, in the rituals disguised as progress, in the wars justified by greed, in the songs that numb, in the screens that seduce, in the institutions that promise salvation without repentance. This is not chaos, it's choreography. They work in ranks. Paul named them principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. That's not poetry. That's hierarchy. That's command. That's military intelligence forged in heaven, now turned against it. And they don't hate God because they misunderstood him. They knew exactly who he was. They were there. They stood in his radiance. They sang in his presence. And still they said no. So now they weaponize memory. They know what glory feels like. So they mimic it. They know what worship sounds like. So they counterfeit it. They know what moves the soul. So they twist it, just enough to make it feel holy, while dragging it somewhere unholy. And this is what makes them terrifying. Not the growl of demons, but the intellect of angels turned traitor. They don't just attack faith, they imitate it. They build altars that look almost right, speak sermons that sound almost true, lead movements that feel almost sacred. Almost, but not quite. They love almost, because almost is enough to ruin you. You've seen the results. Nations with churches in every corner, but none preaching repentance. Leaders quoting scripture while denying the cross. Voices praising God with their lips while crucifying him with their choices. This is the battlefield now, not flaming swords and golden trumpets, but distraction, dilution, division, the slow erosion of truth under a flood of spiritual counterfeits. And still, people don't understand. They think Satan is behind every cold breeze, every nightmare, every illness. But the real work, the real influence, is subtler. A new gospel without the old cost. A truth that doesn't require surrender. A kingdom with no king. That's how the fallen operate now. Not by shouting, by suggesting. Not by destroying, by redefining. Not by war, but by worldview. They are present, silent, strategic, and growing bolder. Because judgment hasn't come yet. Because time still ticks. Because they mistake God's patience for absence. But you know better. You've seen what waits beyond the veil. You've stood too close to glory to be fooled by its shadow. They didn't vanish. They reorganized. And the war didn't end. It just changed shape. You walk among men, and they have no idea what surrounds them. No clue that behind the stage of human history, ancient beings still pull threads, still echo the ambition of their leader, still whisper, "Rise, rise, rise." But there's a limit, a line they cannot cross, a leash they cannot loosen, because for all their power, they are still created, still bound, still under the watch of a throne they dared to challenge. And the one who sits on it has not blinked. Not once. It starts as a feeling, a heaviness in the air that doesn't move with the wind. You've walked through places like this before. Cities where the ground remembers blood, halls where the walls hum with compromise, thrones that glitter, but never give glory. You feel it again now. Not the chaos of shrieking demons, but the calm calculation of something older, something fallen, something still pretending it deserves a crown. There's a difference. You know that now. Demons want flesh. They crave the warmth of blood, the shelter of a spine, the feel of breath and teeth and vocal cords. They can bend toward madness. They are parasites, shrill, desperate, ugly. You've seen them cling to the vulnerable, crawl into the cracks of trauma, twist childhood wounds into adult ruin. They aren't patient. They don't wait. They tear, they howl, they infect. But the fallen, they want dominion. They move in silence, in suits and robes and uniforms. They write laws instead of curses. They sign contracts instead of pacts. They don't scream. They speak in strategy. These aren't the creatures that beg to be cast into pigs. These are the ones that help empires rise. The ones that walk palaces, whispering into the ear of kings. The ones that found their way into Rome, into Babylon, into the temple, into the church. They don't care about one man. They want the mountain he stands on. A demon might haunt a body, but a fallen one haunts a government, a nation, a religion. They don't possess, they infiltrate. And when they speak, they don't stammer, they don't whimper. They speak with the same poise they had in heaven before they fell, before their light turned inward and calcified into pride. You've seen it. The way some churches swell but don't save. The way some leaders bless idols with Christian words. The way holy language is weaponized until the cross becomes currency and God becomes a mascot. That's not demonic. That's fallen. And it works. Because the world is always looking for a savior who won't ask them to change. The fallen know this. They build pulpits on that hunger. They baptize rebellion in language so poetic, no one notices its poison. This is the real war now. Not in the shadows, but in the spotlight. Not in back alleys, but in boardrooms. Not in possession, but in policy. Not in haunted houses, but in holy ones. You watch as nations bow to gold and call it glory. As churches swap altars for stages. As truth gets rewritten, verse by verse, until sin becomes style. Demons never had that kind of patience. But the fallen do. They've been here longer than history. And they're not just watching the game, they're rigging the board. They don't need to make people evil, just distracted, just numb, just busy enough to confuse comfort with peace. Because if you can convince a people they're safe, you can kill them slowly. But you are not confused. You see the shape of it. This isn't a new rebellion. It's the old one, polished, still whispering, I will ascend. Still offering kingdoms in exchange for kneeling. Still painting thrones for mortals who were never meant to rule themselves. And the people, they still reach for it. The idea that they can rule without repentance, that they can be free without surrender, that they can wear crowns without carrying crosses. The fallen are feeding that idea. Everywhere, every day. But even now, even here, there are limits. They can infiltrate, but they can't reign. They can deceive, but they can't create. They can sit in thrones built by man, but they still shudder at the name of the one they betrayed. You see it clearly now. The demons want your flesh, but the fallen, they want your worship. And only one of them will get it. It used to be above you. The war, the thunder, the tearing of wings. You remember it. Light clashing with light, sound without sound, a decision that split the skies. But that battle is over. That battlefield is closed. Now it's here. It's quiet at first. The kind of quiet that hums behind eyelids when you can't sleep. It doesn't scream. It slides into the corner of a classroom. The silence after a husband walks out. The scroll through a phone at 2 a.m. when you swore you were done looking. The war has moved. Not in golden halls, not in fiery heavens, but here, where breath is short and choices are small. Earth, fragile, groaning, temporary, has become the center of a fight that started before time had names. You feel it everywhere. In the bedroom, where shame lives under soft sheets, where a child prays but doesn't know who's listening, where a mother weeps behind a locked door so the kids don't hear. In the boardroom, where men trade souls for stock, where ambition wears a tie, where greed is called growth, and silence is called strategy, where compromise is carved into mission statements, and nobody notices the blood. In the sanctuary, where the altar glows with stage lights, where sermons are trimmed to fit attention spans, where the name of Jesus is whispered just loud enough to be trendy, but never loud enough to offend. In the screens, oh the screens, you've seen what they carry. Lust painted as love, fear dressed as wisdom, influence without integrity. 1,000 voices, none of them asking the only question that matters. Is this true? Because that's the front line now. Truth. Not just believing it, but recognizing it. And in a world where everything is curated, filtered, and captioned, truth becomes harder to spot than the enemy. He doesn't wear horns, he wears endorsements. He doesn't hiss, he hashtags. He doesn't demand your worship, he asks for your attention, then never gives it back. The battlefield isn't made of fire anymore. It's made of distraction. And most don't even know they're bleeding. They laugh while leaking, scroll while sinking, numb while the war wraps around them like a weighted blanket they think is comfort. But you see it. You're awake now. This world isn't neutral. It's not background. It's not stage setting. It's the field. The very air pulses with sides. Every choice echoes. Every compromise leaves a print. Every silence speaks. Heaven no longer trembles, but earth does. Because the enemy has learned, you don't need to conquer what you can quietly corrode. You don't need to fight a person who will willingly entertain their own collapse. So the strategy has changed. The serpent doesn't tempt in gardens now. He tempts in group chats, in HR policies, in the silence between believers who know something's wrong, but don't want to lose their platform. And God? He's still here, not shaken, not panicked, but present, and waiting, watching, calling, not with volume, but with weight. You feel him too. The heaviness of holiness. The still, strange pull that tugs at your chest when you almost click the thing you shouldn't, say the thing you promised you'd buried. Compromise the line you swore was sacred. That's the war now. Not in thunder, but in thresholds. Not in fire, but in fingertips. Not in heaven. Here. The battlefield is where your heart decides what to love. And the war is every moment you pretend it doesn't matter. The sand stings your ankles as you walk behind him. Job, blameless, upright, not perfect, but deeply loyal. A man who wakes early to pray for children who haven't sinned yet, just in case. Who opens his hand instead of clenching it. Who fears God, not because he's terrified, but because he remembers who he is. You walk with him, through olive groves, past laughing servants, past storehouses fat with grain and days full of peace. There's no whisper of danger, no omen in the sky, just the hum of a life that pleases heaven. But you know what he doesn't. You've seen the courtroom, not of man, of heaven, where angels report like soldiers, and silence settles like stone when the throne speaks. And into that silence, he comes. The adversary, not weeping, not snarling, calm, controlled, like a lawyer who knows the rule book well enough to bend it. His wings are long gone, his beauty faded, but his voice still surgical. Have you considered your servant Job? He didn't bring it up. God did. That's what shakes you. God pointed him out, not to destroy him, but to prove something deeper than comfort. And Satan doesn't challenge Job's goodness. He challenges the reason for it. Does he fear you for nothing? You feel the weight of the accusation. Not that Job is wicked, but that Job is shallow, good only because it's easy. Take away the blessings, the hedge, the peace, and he'll curse you. That's the bet. Not over Job's possessions, but over Job's heart. And God says, Yes. You feel your breath catch. He allows it. Not because he's cruel, not because he's absent, because something holy has to be proven in suffering. Not for God's sake, but for everyone watching, even the accuser, even you. So the hedge is lowered, not destroyed, lowered, because even the devil needs permission. He doesn't roam free, he roams aloud. And every strike against Job has to pass through heaven's filter first. You walk with Job as the messengers arrive, one by one, each bearing worse news than the last. Oxen, gone. Servants, slaughtered. Camels, taken. Children, dead. You see his knees fail. You hear the groan claw its way from his stomach to the sky. But no curse comes, only this. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And heaven roars with silence. Even Satan says nothing, because this wasn't supposed to happen. Job was supposed to fold, to break, to curse. But instead, he worships. Not through music, through ashes. That's what the devil still doesn't understand. Worship doesn't start with comfort. It starts with surrender. Even when there are no answers, even when God feels silent. You keep walking. Boils now cover him. Friends arrive, not with comfort, but with suspicion. They try to fix what they don't understand. They accuse, suggest, poke. And Job sits, scraping his skin with broken pottery, trying to make sense of a world that flipped without warning. Still no curse. Still no collapse. Questions, yes. Grief, yes. But underneath it all, loyalty. Not the kind that sings in good weather, the kind that breathes in dust. And in the courtroom above, Satan is silent, defeated not by armies, not by angels, by a man covered in sores, who still believed. This is what you came to see, that even in a world full of pain, even with an enemy permitted to touch almost everything, faith can still rise. And when it does, the enemy has nothing to say. He could move now. That's what you keep thinking. One breath from his mouth could unmake every plan the enemy has ever whispered. One glance from the throne could collapse every structure built in rebellion. The sky could split, the ground could open, and every lie would vanish like smoke. But it doesn't. Not yet. Instead, the world spins on, loud, confused, dripping in injustice. The wicked rise, the proud flourish, the innocent weep. And you ask the question you've asked 1,000 times before. Why wait? The judge isn't sleeping. He isn't overwhelmed. He isn't pacing the halls of heaven trying to come up with a strategy. His silence isn't weakness. It's deliberate. Because judgment is not reaction. It's revelation. And revelation takes time. You feel it deep in your bones. The tension between now and not yet. The weight of a world aching for justice, while the gavel stays raised but unmoved. You hear the blood of the slain cry out from the ground. You hear mothers begging for mercy in rooms no one sees. You see tyrants make speeches while the hungry shrink behind them. And still, he waits. Because the judge does not lash out, he exposes. And exposure is more terrifying than wrath, because it means nothing will be hidden, not even the motives, not even the secret agreements made in the back rooms of the soul. He could burn it all down in a second, but he doesn't want just fire. He wants clarity. So he waits. He waits for pride to fully mature, for deception to show its full face, for rebellion to stop pretending its progress, for the counterfeit to reveal that it was always hollow, and not just out there, but in here, in you. Because this waiting, it isn't just for the world to reveal its fruit. It's for your heart to be laid bare too. Would you follow if there was no reward? Would you worship if nothing got easier? Would you stand for truth even if no one stood with you? These are the questions he lets time answer. You remember how Jesus walked among them, how he let Judas stay at the table, how he let the crowds cheer knowing they would soon scream, how he stood silent while the mockers spit, knowing every lash only confirmed who they really were. That's how the judge moves. Slowly, unshakably, on purpose. He's not gathering evidence. He already knows. He's letting them reveal themselves, one action at a time, one word at a time, one rejection of grace after another, until the truth is undeniable, not to him, but to them. Because when judgment finally comes, it won't just be fair. It will be obvious. No one will argue. No one will say it was rushed. No one will claim they weren't warned. Every mouth will close, every knee will bend, and every eye will finally see what they had been given time to notice all along. That's why he waits. He's not hiding. He's revealing. And when the curtain lifts, when the scroll unrolls, when every mask falls off, and every excuse disintegrates in the light, there won't be shock. Just clarity. You see it now. The wait is not a pause. It's a process. And the judge? He isn't hesitating. He's giving every soul one more chance to reveal who they really are. It's the quiet that breaks you. Not the tragedy, not the chaos, not the cries in the dark, or the scream no one hears. It's the silence that follows. The long, cold stretch of stillness where heaven doesn't speak. Where your prayers feel like echoes. Where your questions hang in the air so long, they start to feel like answers. You wonder if God has forgotten. You wouldn't be the first. Elijah under the broom tree, David in the cave, Job on the ash heap. Even Jesus in Gethsemane, sweating blood while the sky stayed mute. They all asked it in some form, "Where are you?" But the silence was never absence. It was timing. You feel the weight of it now, a kind of divine stillness that settles over everything, like he's holding his breath, like he's waiting for something even. He refuses to rush. You don't like it. You want movement. You want a sign, a voice, a crack of thunder, or a whisper of reassurance. Anything to prove that your cries haven't been filed away and forgotten, that your pain hasn't slipped through the cracks of the cosmos. But nothing comes. Just the slow turning of days, the clock, the ache, the waiting. And it feels cruel until you remember what you've learned before, that some of the deepest work God ever does happens in silence. Like seeds buried under soil, no sound, no sign, no proof, until suddenly green breaks through, or bones knit quietly beneath skin, or wounds close while you sleep. He works like that sometimes. Not in fanfare, not in fireworks, but in the hush between storms, because his patience is not laziness, it's precision. There are things he refuses to do too early, because if he did, they'd shatter under the weight of their own incompleteness. Sometimes he holds back justice so that mercy can finish its sentence. Sometimes he delays answers because the question hasn't finished reshaping you yet. Sometimes he seems distant, when in truth, he's sitting closer than breath, waiting for you to notice the difference between noise and nearness. You think of Lazarus, how Jesus waited on purpose, letting sickness take its full course, letting the tomb seal, letting everyone grieve, not because he didn't love them, but because resurrection was coming. And resurrection always requires silence first. You remember the space between Friday and Sunday, how all of heaven held still, how hell whispered it had won, how the earth sat beneath a veil of confusion, loss, and unanswered prayer. But the stone rolled back anyway, right on time. Not early, not late, right when the silence had done its work. So you sit with that now. Let it settle into your bones. Silence does not mean forgotten. It means you're in the middle of something sacred. You're standing in the waiting room of glory, where everything is still unfolding, where God is still writing, where the author doesn't skip chapters, even when the characters are tired. You may not hear him yet, but he hears you. And when it's time, not a second before, not a heartbeat after, he will speak. And the silence that once made you doubt will become the holy space where your faith learned to breathe. The wind is dry, not cruel, but relentless. It drags sand across your skin like time itself is trying to peel you down to bone. You squint against the brightness, not of glory, but of the sun beating against stone. You've never seen the wilderness look like this before. Empty, and yet full of weight. Jesus walks ahead of you, alone, quiet. 40 days. No bread, no rest, no distraction. Only hunger, but not the kind you're used to. This isn't just about food. It's a hollowing, a stripping away of everything not eternal. You can feel it radiating off of him, flesh starving, but spirit sharpening. Then, suddenly, he's there. You don't hear him arrive. You don't see his shadow, but the air tightens in a way that's too familiar, like doubt has taken on skin, like deception has grown teeth. The accuser. He doesn't bow, he doesn't hiss, he doesn't drag chains or breathe sulfur. He walks in like he belongs, because once he did. And when he speaks, his voice is calm, calculated, like a lawyer who knows how close he can get to the line without crossing it. If you are the Son of God, and there it is. Not a curse, not a scream, a question. Not an accusation, an invitation. Turn stones to bread. Show me your power. Prove it. Prove who you are. But Jesus doesn't bite. He doesn't show off. He doesn't need to. It is written, 3 words. That's all. He doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. He quotes truth like a sword, being drawn slowly, not to wound, but to withstand. You've heard temptation described as a trap before, a snare, a pit. But this doesn't feel like that. This feels like a test, a proving, a confrontation not meant to humiliate, but to reveal. Temptation isn't weakness. It's a battleground. And here, right here, Jesus stands where Adam fell, where Israel wandered, where you've stumbled. He stands. The enemy tries again, takes him higher, shows him kingdoms, offers shortcuts to glory that skip the cross, tries to barter the eternal for the immediate. But again, Jesus doesn't flinch. It is written, you see Satan blink, not in fear, in frustration, because this is new. He's used to finding cracks, weak spots, ego, desperation. But here, in this heat, in this hunger, he finds nothing. No vanity, no panic, no pride trying to prove itself. Only authority, quiet, rooted, unshaken. And it makes you wonder, how many times have you mistaken temptation for failure? How many times have you assumed being tempted meant you were already losing, when all along it was a test, one that reveals who you trust, your strength or his word, your instincts or his timing, your appetite or his presence. Jesus doesn't defeat Satan with miracles. He doesn't summon angels or shake the earth. He just holds the line, in silence, in scripture, in surrender, until the enemy flees. And that's what stuns you the most. Not the temptation, the endurance. Because sometimes, victory doesn't look like escape. It looks like standing still, refusing to turn stones into bread, refusing to take the crown without the cross, refusing to prove what heaven has already declared. And when it's over, the angels come. Not before. After. After the ache. After the hunger. After the silence. That's how this works. Temptation isn't the trap. It's the hallway. The proving ground. The place where obedience is forged in fire and silence and sand. You don't walk away feeling heroic. You walk away feeling hollowed. But in that hollow space, God fills you. You remember the darkness, midday, and the sky folds in on itself like creation is ashamed to watch. The clouds are thick, but it's more than weather. It's weight. Heaven isn't weeping. Heaven is holding its breath. And there he is, beaten, stripped, nailed to splintered wood like a criminal no one wants to claim. His skin is torn open, but his eyes are still watching, not angry, not afraid, just full, as if he sees more than they do, as if he knows this isn't the end. But to everyone else, it looks like defeat. Blood dripping into dust, thieves laughing on either side, mockers below, soldiers gambling for pieces of his pain. You almost can't look, because this doesn't feel holy. It feels like loss. But you know the story. You know what this moment is hiding. And so does he. The adversary is watching too, quietly, not from the crowd, but from the shadows behind it. This is what he's waited for, since the garden, since the curse, since God whispered that one day the woman's seed would crush his head. This looks like the perfect ending. The sun is dying. The promise is bleeding. The light is fading. The snake strikes, and for a moment, it lands. Heel pierced, body broken, breath failing. And yet, something's wrong. Not in heaven. In him. Because the moment the blood touches earth, something ancient shifts. He thought this was the trap, but it was the snare, and he walked right into it. You feel it like a shockwave through eternity. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't loss. This was bait. He took the flesh. He drew the blood. He played the game. And it backfired. Because the curse didn't fall on Jesus. The curse fell into him, and he drank it. All of it. Every lie, every wound, every betrayal, murder, theft, lust, scream, silence. He pulled it into himself, not to carry forever, but to kill it. And when he said, "It is finished," it wasn't surrender. It was a verdict. The contract of sin canceled. The ransom paid. The veil torn. And the snake's fangs shattered. He bit, but he didn't break him, because the blood wasn't spilled. It was given. And blood that's given doesn't rot. It resurrects. You feel it now. The irony so sharp it sings. The enemy orchestrated the crucifixion, and in doing so, signed his own defeat, because the death he celebrated was the death of death itself. The Son didn't just die. He descended, not as victim, as conqueror. He walked into hell, not as a guest, but as a judge. And when he walked out 3 days later, the chains didn't come with him. You understand now. The cross wasn't tragedy. It was strategy. A divine ambush. Patient, perfect, and permanent. What looked like humiliation was the highest throne. What looked like failure was flawless victory. What looked like the end was the beginning of the undoing. The serpent bruised the heel, but the heel crushed the skull. And the bruise healed, but the skull still cracks under the weight of that empty tomb. And so, you look again at the wood, the blood, the silence. And this time, you don't see defeat. You see a door, opened with nails, swung wide with mercy. And the enemy? He's still running from what he thought he had won. He sat close. That's what you can't forget. Judas wasn't distant. He wasn't on the fringe of the crowd or slinking behind a tree. He was at the table, elbows near elbows, feet washed by the same hands that shaped the stars, eyes meeting eyes. He sat close and still betrayed him. You think of the moment often, the quiet before it, the bread dipped, the whisper of footsteps in the dark. But more than anything, you think of the look on Jesus' face. Not startled, not confused, just steady. As if the betrayal didn't break the plan, it confirmed it. Because Judas didn't surprise him. The kiss wasn't unexpected. The silver wasn't a secret. The betrayal wasn't an accident. It was part of the blueprint. You wrestle with that. How can betrayal be part of redemption? How can a wound help a healing? How can the hand that handed him over be allowed to hold the bread first? But that's what happened. Judas ate, and Jesus still served him, not out of naivety, but out of omniscience. He knew. He knew the plan. He knew the prophecy. He knew the scriptures and the shadows and the serpent that had waited since Eden for this moment to strike. And still, he offered him the cup, because betrayal, even soaked in venom, cannot cancel sovereignty. You remember what Jesus said, that night so drenched in tension you can still taste it in the air. What you are about to do, do quickly. Not a plea, not a bargain, a release. Because the door of death was swinging open. And Judas held the key. Not because he was chosen to be evil, but because God can use even the darkest decision to light the path to salvation. And that's what this was. Not just a betrayal, a passage. The betrayal of the Son of God didn't destroy the gospel. It opened it. 30 pieces of silver didn't tarnish the plan. They triggered it. And when Judas left the room, Scripture says, it was night. But it had already been dark for a while. Not just outside, in him, in his motives, in his misunderstandings, in that slow drift between admiration and agenda. Because Judas didn't start as a traitor. He followed. He watched the miracles. He handed out bread to the hungry. He cast out demons in his name. But somewhere along the way, the Jesus he wanted didn't match the Jesus that was. And when your expectations speak louder than his word, betrayal starts to feel like justice. You see it now. He didn't just sell Jesus out of greed. He sold him because the Messiah wasn't moving fast enough, wasn't rebelling loud enough, wasn't taking power. He was laying it down, and Judas couldn't take it. So he gave him away. But even that didn't break the plan, because Jesus wasn't captured. He gave himself. And what Judas did for profit, Jesus did for purpose. The guards didn't drag him to the cross. The betrayal didn't pin him. He walked, willingly, straight through the garden, straight into the trial, straight to the beam, because the redemption of the world required a price, and even betrayal can carry the receipt. You wonder sometimes, what if Judas had waited just a few more hours, to see the blood wasn't a defeat, to hear the temple veil tear, to stand in the garden when the stone rolled back? But he didn't. He gave up before grace got the final word. And that's the difference. Not who betrayed, but who came back. Peter denied him too, but Peter returned. Judas despaired, but never repented. And still, even Judas, even that kiss, even that silver, was used. Because God doesn't waste anything. Not pain, not betrayal, not the worst night of your life. Even the hands that meant to hurt you can end up helping you walk straight into redemption. Judas thought he broke it, but he only opened the door. You feel it before you see him. The shift in the air, the weight behind the thought you didn't invite, the question that arrives not as curiosity, but corrosion. It doesn't shout. It hisses. Quiet, like a thread unspooling just fast enough for you to trip if you follow it. You've heard it before. You're not really forgiven. You haven't changed. You're wasting God's time. You're wasting yours. And for a moment, it sounds like your own voice. But it's not. It's his. The accuser. Still speaking. Still prowling. Still doing what he does best. Not through possession, not through spectacle, but suggestion. Through twisted half-truths. Through old guilt rewrapped as insight. Through shadows cast at just the right angle to make you doubt your own reflection. And you ask the question, why is he still allowed? Why, after the cross, after the blood, after the veil tore and the grave gave up? Is he still whispering? Shouldn't he be locked away already? Shouldn't he be silenced? But heaven hasn't gagged him, not yet, because judgment is coming, but not complete, because the end is written, but still unfolding, because everything he does now is watched, measured, leashed. You see it clearly in Job's story. He didn't barge into the throne room. He was summoned. He didn't act freely. He asked. He waited for permission. He followed limits he didn't choose. And that hasn't changed. The enemy has access, but not authority. He can prowl, but not pounce without approval. He can accuse, but only within the boundaries the judge allows. Because his presence isn't proof of power. It's proof of purpose. Even now, he serves it, unwillingly, unknowingly, angrily. Because every lie he tells, every trap he sets, every whisper he weaves, God already knows, already sees, already weaves into a bigger thread of glory that he can't touch, only fuel. The accuser walks among God's people, but he is not free. He is on a leash made of prophecy. Every attempt he makes to destroy a child of God must pass through the filter of divine intention. Every scheme is seen, every whisper recorded, every move accounted for. He thinks he's playing chess, but the board belongs to God, and the end game was written before he took his first step. So why is he still talking? Because God wants him exposed. Because the final verdict isn't just to punish him, it's to show him. Show him what love looks like when it bleeds, what mercy does when it's mocked, what freedom becomes when it chooses to worship anyway. And he can't look away. He watches you, hoping you'll fall. But every time you don't, it burns him. Because your obedience testifies, your worship testifies, your quiet trust in the middle of temptation testifies, not just to the world, to him, he who once stood in glory, he who once led worship, he who once reflected light, now watches dust-covered children walk through fire with more loyalty than he ever had in perfection. And every time you lift your eyes to heaven and whisper, "Still I trust you," he loses. Again, you see it now. He still has access, but not to hurt you without limits. His access is a courtroom formality, because this is not a war of equals. This is a trial. And the accuser, he's not the judge. He's not even a threat. He's evidence. Evidence that God's love cannot be broken, that his children cannot be bought, that even in the whisper of temptation, grace roars louder. So when you hear him again, and you will, don't panic. Just remember, he's on a leash, and the one holding it calls you beloved. You've seen pits before, graves, caves, empty places where light refuses to linger. But this one feels different. It doesn't gape. It waits. You can feel it under your feet sometimes, like a breath held too long, like something buried alive and listening. The abyss. Not fire, not brimstone, not yet. Just waiting. It's not chaos down there. Not exactly. It's structure. cold, silent structure, not like the disorder people imagine when they think of hell. Devils dancing, souls screaming, flames licking at the edge of God's mercy. That image flatters the enemy too much. This isn't rage. It's containment. You understand it now. Hell, Sheol, Tartarus, the deep. It's not a party for the damned. It's not a throne room for Satan. It's not even judgment in full. It's custody, a cell, a pause, a legal boundary. Because wrath isn't the first act. It's the last. You remember the stories. The demons who begged not to be sent there yet. The swine who ran wild when they saw what waited beyond the veil. They weren't afraid of destruction. They were terrified of the delay, of being locked in the place where time freezes, where glory doesn't echo, and the voice of God is silent. It's not the fire that terrifies them. It's the silence. Because hell is not absence of God's knowledge. It's absence of his presence. And the abyss is worse still. It is a waiting room for judgment. But judgment hasn't arrived. The angels who left their post, the ones bound in chains from the earliest rebellion, and they're still there. Not forgotten, just held. Every move Satan makes, he knows where it ends. Every lie he spreads, he feels the pull beneath him. Every time a demon flees the presence of Jesus, it's not the cross they're escaping. It's the pit. The sentence not yet served. You've heard people ask, why doesn't God just throw him in already? The truth? Because mercy delays even what justice demands. Because every moment Satan breathes, another soul chooses light. Because even the enemy's time is being used to rescue what he tried to ruin. The abyss waits because God waits. And when he acts, it won't be partial. It won't be a scolding. It won't be a symbolic exile. It will be final, total, sealed. Revelation calls it a lake, not of water, but of fire. A place with no bottom, no exit, no appeals. And Satan won't rule there. He will burn there, not as king, as prisoner, but not yet, because the judge has not risen from his seat, because the gavel has not fallen, because the book is still being opened, page by page, name by name. And until then, the abyss waits. Hell is not yet unleashed in full, and that fact, that restraint, is mercy. You begin to see it. This delay isn't softness, it's severity, controlled. The enemy walks with a chain trailing behind him, not visible, but felt. A reminder, a countdown. And he feels it shortening. Every whisper he breathes, every throne he mimics, every bite he takes of what isn't his. It's borrowed, because the abyss doesn't forget. It just waits for God to speak. And when he does, the sentence won't be symbolic. It will be a door that doesn't open again. And the one who once stood in heaven will vanish into silence. You've watched men die, some with cries, some with silence, some slowly, gripping at breath that slips through cracked lips, and some in an instant, before they even realize it's over. Death feels like an ending. A door slammed shut, a page turned, a body returned to dust. But spirits don't die like that. You realize it one evening as you stare into nothing. Not the sky, not the ground, just the space where thought becomes weight and weight becomes understanding. There's no wind here, just stillness and a whisper that isn't spoken. He doesn't bleed. He doesn't decay. He doesn't starve, sleep, or age. Satan doesn't die like a man. And so, judgment can't be a sword. It has to be something else. You understand now why Jesus said not to fear those who can kill the body, but the one who can cast both body and soul into Gehenna. Because physical death is not the worst thing that can happen to a being. Erasure isn't always the end. Sometimes, The greater judgment is being forced to continue, stripped of glory, of access, of hope, alive, but unreachable. That's the shape justice takes for spirits. Not obliteration, containment. Not annihilation, separation. He was made of light once, not the kind that glows, the kind that sings, crafted to reflect glory, not carry it. But he reached for what was never his, and found that spirits, once turned, don't break like bones. They bend, they twist, and they persist. That's what makes him dangerous. That's also what makes him pathetic. He can't be destroyed like a man, so he's judged in a language deeper than blood. His sentence isn't death, it's isolation, banishment, the slow suffocation of pride in a realm where no one hears your roar. And it's coming, but not yet. For now, he walks, speaks, deceives. But it's not freedom. It's rope, unraveling slowly behind him. And when it runs out, it won't snap. It will pull. Because the judgment of spirits isn't execution. It's exile. He's being unmade. Not by force, but by truth. Every time Jesus is worshipped, every time forgiveness is chosen over bitterness, every time a soul resists temptation in the quiet, his kingdom cracks a little more. Because spirits don't die, they diminish. He grows smaller with every surrendered heart, weaker with every whispered prayer. And one day, when the last name is read from the book, when the last choice is made, when mercy has finished its reach, judgment will take its final shape, not with fire from heaven, not with war horses and thunder, but with a chain and a voice and a verdict that echoes through eternity, not as rage, but as record. Because spirits don't die, but they can be silenced. And when Satan is cast out, truly, finally, it won't be with a scream. It will be with a sealing, a door shut behind him, not with anger, but with authority. And you'll understand then that what makes judgment holy isn't how loud it is, it's how final. You've heard the question too many times to count. If God is so powerful, why wait? Why let the devil speak at all? Why not crush him now, bury the evil, silence the mockery, tear open the sky, and end it? You've asked it too. Because delay feels like weakness when you're hurting, when you watch betrayal thrive, when you see headlines that sound more like hell than hope, when another child suffers, another war begins, another lie wins, and still, no gavel. But heaven doesn't rush, and justice doesn't panic. You start to understand it like a slow sunrise. First, just a glimmer, then a shape, then a horizon so wide you can't believe you ever thought God was late, because justice isn't about speed. It's about witness, and the whole universe is watching. That's why it's taking so long. Not because God is indecisive, not because he's overwhelmed, but because every being, every throne, every realm must see, must know exactly what rebellion costs. If he had crushed Satan the moment he turned, would anyone have understood? The angels? The humans yet to be formed? You? Or would they wonder if love was fragile? If free will was conditional? If glory was just a pretty word for control? No. Judgment had to unfold. It had to be seen, played out across centuries, so that every lie Satan ever told could be exposed, naked and unraveling in front of the same creation he once tried to deceive, so that no one, not even the enemy himself, could claim injustice. You realize now, God doesn't just punish evil, he lets it reveal itself. He lets it speak, slither, swell, and then collapse, under its own weight, under its own emptiness. Because when judgment finally comes, it won't need defending. It will be obvious. you'll see that mercy didn't delay wrath. It framed it. And when the sentence is finally spoken, no one will cry foul. No one will pity the serpent, because he will have been given every chance to repent and rejected each one with sharpened teeth. And every soul who chose him will have seen the truth first and chosen anyway. This isn't delay out of uncertainty. This is the slow reveal of reality. Because God doesn't just want justice done. He wants it understood by every angel, every spirit, every heart, so that when the throne is surrounded and the books are opened and the accuser is dragged into the lake that burns, there will be no confusion, only clarity. Justice won't feel like a surprise. It'll feel like a conclusion, earned, unfolded, true, and you'll see it with your own eyes. The enemy, once radiant with borrowed light, now gaunt with rot he called power. The liar caught in his own logic, the deceiver exposed by the very freedom he despised. And heaven won't cheer with cruelty, it will exhale with peace, because the war will be over. The echoes silenced, and justice, not rushed, not reactive, but revealed, will stand tall like a mountain that had always been there, just hidden behind the fog. God is not late. He's showing the world what evil does when left alone. He's showing the cosmos what love does when it bleeds but does not break. He's showing every throne, seen and unseen, that he never needed to raise his voice to be right. Judgment delayed isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And when it finally falls, it won't just settle scores. It will settle everything. You've heard it whispered like a shield, a sentence wrapped in soft tones, spoken to silence fear, or guilt, or consequence. God is love, and he is. But what they forget, what you're starting to remember, is that love doesn't cancel truth. And real love, the holy kind, never pretends justice doesn't matter. It requires it. Because a God who only hugs and never judges isn't holy. He's a mascot. But your God is not a slogan. He's a fire. Not just warmth, but clarity. Not just affection, but alignment. Not just forgiveness, but verdict. You've felt it before. The tension between mercy and consequence. The ache of wanting a second chance, and the sting of still having to live with the result. And in that ache, you wondered, if God really loves me, why didn't he erase this part too? But that's not how love works. Love forgives, but love also reveals. And truth, the kind that shapes galaxies, doesn't evaporate because you're sorry. You remember the first man and woman, the garden, the tree, the whisper. They didn't stop being loved when they fell, but they still had to leave. Not because God wanted distance, but because sin changed the atmosphere. Because glory and guilt can't share a home. Because love without consequence isn't love. It's enablement. And God is not here to enable evil. He's here to end it. But not by shortcut, not by sentiment, by justice. And so you begin to understand why Satan is still breathing. It's not because God forgot. It's not because love looked away. It's because the full weight of truth is still descending, slow, deliberate, holy. Because when God renders a verdict, he wants no shadows left to hide in. You've seen what human love can look like. Conditional, convenient, quiet when it's needed most. The kind that hugs you in public and ignores the damage in private. But divine love doesn't flinch. It tells you who you are. It tells you who he is. And it tells you what happens when one tries to dethrone the other. It tells the truth. In full. That's why the cross wasn't just a gesture. It was a payment. Because love couldn't just pardon. It had to pay. Someone had to carry the weight, and Jesus didn't do it to cancel consequences. He did it to carry yours. But not Lucifer's. Not the one who looked at glory and chose ambition, who saw the light and wanted to eclipse it. There is no blood for him. Only chains, only silence, only the sentence waiting at the edge of time. And when it falls, it won't be rage. It will be righteousness. Because God's love is not fragile. It doesn't need to pretend evil is misunderstood. It doesn't look at rebellion and say, let's just move on. It says, this ends here. Not because God stopped loving, but because he never stopped telling the truth. And truth demands a verdict. So when Satan is judged, it won't feel cruel. It will feel inevitable. The liar who said love was weakness will be crushed by the love that proved it wasn't. And you'll see it for what it is. Not vengeance, not overreaction, just holy, clean, ancient justice. Truth, sharpened by love. Love, grounded in truth. Not one without the other. Not ever. That's the kind of love you were made from. And the kind of love the enemy cannot survive. You are standing, but you don't remember walking in. There's no ceiling, yet you feel one above you. No sun, yet light pours in from every direction at once. No walls, but no exits either. It's not a dream. It's not a symbol. It's real. The final courtroom. And you are not alone. They are there. All of them. Too many to count, but you feel every gaze, every breathless hush. Some weep quietly. Some stare in silence. Some tremble. No one speaks out of turn. Because here, truth doesn't need volume. It just is. Before you. Not beside, not above, sits the judge. He doesn't shift in his seat. Doesn't ask for order. Doesn't bang a gavel. He is the order. The law and the presence. And when he opens the book, it doesn't sound like pages turning. It sounds like time itself unraveling. Your name is in there. You know it. So is every name that ever breathed, whispered, rebelled, worshipped. Nothing is forgotten. Not one act of kindness. Not one act of cruelty. Not one lie. Not one sacrifice. And now, another figure steps forward. He does not walk like the others. His stride isn't fear. It's fury, defiance, familiar. Satan, but not as a dragon, not a beast, not a smoke-wrapped illusion of terror. Just him, uncloaked, small, ugly, in a way that has nothing to do with shape and everything to do with what's missing. The light no longer clings to him. Glory no longer echoes from his form. He has no worship behind him, no angels at his side, only silence. And still, he glares. At the judge, at you, at the book. Because this is not his courtroom. It never was. He stands, not to accuse, but to answer. And the questions aren't spoken, because they've already been asked. For millennia. In every garden, every war, every whisper of temptation, every cry of, where was God when? And now, the answers come, not from his lips, from the evidence. You see it all. His rebellions, his schemes, the way he twisted beauty into bait, truth into poison, how he mimicked glory to make himself seem equal, when all he ever did was reflect borrowed light. He sees it too, and you watch something break in him, not repentance. That ship sailed before Eden. What breaks is pretense, the illusion that he was ever in control, ever powerful, ever feared for the right reasons. And then, without ceremony, without a shout, the judge speaks. It's not a yell, it's a verdict. And you don't need interpretation, because this voice made galaxies, This voice raised the dead. This voice is the beginning and the end. And it says one thing: no more. No more access, no more accusation, no more delay. Satan doesn't scream, he shatters. The weight of truth pins him where he stands, and for the first time, you see fear in his eyes. Real fear, the kind that knows nothing is coming to save him. Not logic, not appeal, not pride. He has run out of shadows. And then, the chains appear. Not forged by men, not glowing with fire. They don't need to. They shimmer with something heavier than metal. Finality. And they don't just wrap around him. They consume him. Not violently, not with rage, but with authority. He thrashes, but it's a child's tantrum now, because the courtroom isn't moving, and the judge isn't angry. He's done. And so are you. Because as the books close, and the light rises, and the enemy is pulled back into the place he always feared most, you realize something. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Finally spoken. Finally finished. And Satan? He doesn't just lose. He's answered for. You turn. And somehow, time turns with you. Not backward, but through. Not like flipping pages. More like touching the fibers between them. You don't just remember. You witness the moments all over again. Every pain, every fall, every tear you tried to swallow, every silence you thought meant God had walked away. They're all here, but they don't look how you left them. The betrayals aren't just jagged memories anymore. They're bridges. The losses you thought would break you, now glowing seams in a garment that was being stitched the whole time. The scars? Not erased. Still visible, but no longer raw. They shine, like wounds touched by fire but not consumed. You don't flinch looking at them now, because now you understand. He didn't waste any of it. Not the nights you thought were pointless, not the prayers you thought went unanswered, not the temptations you thought disqualified you, not even the mistakes you made twice. They're still part of the story. But the story no longer bows to the darkness. It uses it. You look again at the enemy, bound, silenced, reduced, and you feel it in your chest, the full weight of the reversal. That he didn't just lose the war, he lost leverage. Every lie he ever told became another thread in the tapestry God was weaving, not despite evil, but through it. Even Satan's rebellion, even his attempt to corrupt, even the cross, was used, not condoned, not applauded, but repurposed. You see it like a lens snapping into focus. What was meant for ruin became the stage for redemption. What was meant for fear became the fire that forged faith. What was meant to divide drew you closer. You remember that one person who left you bleeding, that door that slammed before you were ready, that season you barely survived. And now you see, they weren't endings. They were invitations. To cling harder, to ask deeper questions, to meet God in places polished theology never touches. Even rebellion was outmatched. Even evil was outmaneuvered. Because nothing is more terrifying to darkness than a God who doesn't waste pain, but uses it, twists it into testimony, wields it like a chisel, lets it speak. But only so he can answer it louder. You realize now why Satan was never destroyed immediately, why he was allowed to move, to tempt, to whisper. Because God knew, not just how to stop evil, but how to undo it, from the inside out, thread by thread. What the enemy sowed in malice, God rewove in mercy. You remember the garden, the serpent's hiss, the taste of fruit, the shame, the exile, and now, the return, not to innocence, but to understanding. This is what it means to redeem, not to pretend it didn't happen, but to make it holy. And that's what you're walking through now, Not erasure, not amnesia, not a clean slate that forgets the blood. A resurrection, with memory intact, with proof that the grave wasn't the end, it was the womb. And evil wasn't just defeated, it was stripped, humiliated, turned inside out like a costume, exposing the smallness of what it always was. A parasite, with no idea how powerful light could be when it chooses to touch darkness and not flinch. So you stand there, not in bitterness, not in disbelief, but in awe, that the same hand that wrote galaxies into existence let your scars remain, not to shame you, but to show you. You were never wasting time, even when you thought you were. Nothing was wasted, not even evil. It's quiet now, not the silence of before creation silence, not the hush of a courtroom waiting on verdict, but the stillness that comes after everything has been said, after the final line has been read aloud, after the last voice, the last cry, the last whisper of resistance finally dies out. This isn't peace like the world gives. It's not calm. It's completion. And now, you see, the enemy wasn't destroyed because God was soft. He was restrained because you weren't ready. Not just you, but the you that still had questions, that still clung to your fear, that still wavered between obedience and escape, that still mistook comfort for calling, that still needed time. Time to break, time to heal, time to finally want what was real. Because God wasn't holding off for Satan's sake. He was holding off for yours. You realize it in pieces. The way every delay wasn't a denial, it was an opening. The way justice didn't crash down like a hammer, but hovered like a door, waiting for you to walk through it. Not forced, not coerced, invited. And some took that invitation. Others mocked it. And some waited too long. You remember someone who almost turned back, who almost let go of the bitterness, who almost said yes, but didn't. They thought there would be more time. And now, there isn't. Because mercy is not eternal. It's offered, not owed. And the moment the last name was sealed in the book, the waiting ended. Not with thunder, not with flames, but with a final breath. Time ran out. Not because God got tired, but because the story reached the last chapter. And Satan? He always thought the delay was his victory. But it was his leash. He wasn't roaming free. He was pacing a cage built from patience. And now that patience is fulfilled. Because now you are fulfilled. You, and all like you. The ones who once wondered why evil lasted so long, now see why goodness had to last longer. It had to outweigh pride, outshine bitterness, outlive rebellion, because the cross wasn't just about paying for sin, it was about buying time. Time for the prodigal, time for the skeptic, time for the weary, time for you. That's why the serpent was still whispering, why the accuser still roamed, why the scars still ached, and the thorns still bled. Because someone else still needed one more sunrise, one more second chance, one more nudge in the dark. And now, every soul who would say yes, has. And the rest? They're not forgotten. But they're no longer waiting. Because mercy only makes sense when judgment is real. You feel it in your bones now. The truth that once stung finally settling into peace. God didn't hesitate. He calculated. Every moment of delay wasn't indecision. It was a countdown. And it's over now. Satan doesn't speak anymore. His mouth is closed. Not by force, but by finality. The story isn't about him anymore. Maybe it never was. It was always about the one who waited. The one who stood at the edge of time with arms open, not just to welcome the obedient, but to plead with the stubborn. Not just to rescue, but to reason. And now, the pleading is done, because you've come home. The story didn't end when evil began. It ended when love had the last word. And that word wasn't vengeance. It wasn't wrath. It wasn't even justice. It was finished. And now you rest. Not because the battle ended, but because it was won.